Kanata is your average loner protagonist who gets reincarnated into another world as an ugly, pathetic goblin. Soon after his reincarnation, Kanata realizes that being a goblin is not that bad and becomes the leader of the pack and forges his own puny kingdom. Our MC, Kanata Tumakai, glares towards the moon as an eccentric woman tears him apart. The woman keeps piercing him with her knife while uttering his name. At this point, Kanata realizes that his death is imminent as he loses consciousness. Right after, Kanata regains consciousness, questioning why he's still alive and why there is an ugly green old fart standing in front of him. The old fart names him Gobrou and feeds him a weird insect. Eventually, Gobrou notices that he is surrounded by multiple green ugly babies, and the fact that he's one of them. This makes him realize that he has been reincarnated into another world after his death. On day 3, Gobrou is already an obnoxious brat. At this time, Gobrou has accepted that he has been given a second chance in life and intends to make the most of it. On day 4, the old fart gives them their final dinner and asks them to arrange food for themselves. Gobrou instead leaves the cave for the first time and finds that this world is different from his previous. He meets another goblin named Gobkichi and begins ordering him about like he's a big shot. Being the dumb goblin he is, Gobkichi obeys. During the past 3 days, Gobrou has noticed that Gobkichi is physically the strongest goblin there and chooses him as his hunting partner. Making use of his previous life experience, Gobrou and Gobkichi manage to capture a wild rabbit. Gobkichi gets ahead of himself and attempts to devour the rabbit by himself and gets scolded by Gobrou. After this, Gobrou pulls out the rabbit's horn to use as a weapon, and suddenly, a weird message appears in his brain, stating that he has acquired an animal horn. This shocks Gobrou a bit, but he doesn't pay much heed to it and proceeds to hunt. Both of these ugly goblins continue to hunt rabbits for fun, and Gobrou learns an additional skill called Escape. After eating rabbit meat, he finds he has inherited his previous life skill Absorption, which allows him to consume whatever he wants and gain skills from it. Even though all of his prior life skills have been reset, he is optimistic that he will learn them again. The following day, a female goblin named Gobmi starts simping over Gobrou. Since she's a gold digger, and seeing her desperation, Gobrou offers to accompany them. Unfortunately for Gobmi, it poured the next day, forcing them to remain behind. Meanwhile, Gobrou attempts to craft a new weapon for himself and accidentally discovers nude human ladies confined in the treasure room. Gobrou, on the other hand, seemed unconcerned about them and walked away. He is then contacted by the old fart, who suggests that Gobrou might be able to level up quickly due to his dedication. He also informs him that after he achieves level 100, he would be able to transform into a hobgoblin. The old fart is also looking forward to the return of this village's hobgoblin and the prey they'll bring this time, with an unpleasant smile. The following day, Gobmi the simp accompanies them to hunt, and it turns out she's not as useless as Sakura. This time around, they manage to capture a snake, which grants Gobrou some extraordinary abilities like Venom, Search, and Evil Eye. He blabbers about his skills, but Gobmi and Gobkichi don't understand about anything he's saying. He doesn't let Gobkichi consume the snake head and eats it for himself. On day 10, they discover an undiscovered cave and decide to investigate it. As soon as they reach the cave, a swarm of bats attack them. Gobrou urges Gobmi to flee as he uses Gobkichi as a shield and kills several bats. After swallowing the bats, Gobrou gains additional abilities. Meanwhile, the other goblins have become resentful of Gobrou's efforts and resolve to teach him a lesson in the night. Luckily, Gobrou's search ability alerts him to the oncoming threat, and he beats the living shit out of them. Gobmi becomes enraged on his behalf and subdues one of them. The following day, the trio manages to kill a chubby orc who is on his way to get some milk, and Gobrou acquires more skills. After eating his fill, he instructs Gobkichi and Gobmi to pack the remaining food and take it back to the cave. He had realized that the goblins were just as useless as they looked and decided to become their sugar daddy. That night, Gobrou receives a message regarding his evolution and accidentally accepts it. The following morning, he wakes up to find that he has evolved into a handsome jerk alongside Gobkichi. Seeing this, Gobmi starts simping over him even more. Gobkichi then gets ahead of himself and challenges Gobrou to a fight, only to get his whooped. After this, the trio hunts down a pack of wolves and takes them back to the cave. Gobrou allows the useless goblins to eat their fill, but on one condition. He wants them to return whatever they consume and promises to teach them hunting. He then announces that the goblins are all his comrades, to use them as corporate workers who have no rights. The goblins are way too dumb to realize this and start chanting Gobrou's name as if he's Nelson Mandela. On day 17, Gobrou wakes up Old Fart Gobji and reveals that all the human women have unalived themselves. To hide this information from the others, they hold a secret funeral and burn their corpses. Gobrou realizes that all these women must have been devastated by the treatment they were getting and eventually decided to drink poison. From that day onward, Gobrou keeps training the useless goblins to forge his own army and additionally gains extraordinary skills as well. Just then, the previous generation of goblins also returned from their expedition and brought some human women with them. Being a human in his previous his life, Gobrou demands to keep the humans for himself, which infuriates the hobgoblins. Before the matter escalates, 2 other goblins appear out of nowhere and suggest a duel between Gobrou and the previous leader. Gobrou folds him like a lawn chair, and in turn, becomes the new leader. With no other option left, the other hobgoblins have no other option but to obey. With this, the human women are now Gobrou's property, and reassures them that no one will lay a finger on them. He guarantees their necessities, and in return, Gobrou demands these women to teach him human knowledge. The women reveal that they were a part of a hunting group and were ambushed by the goblins mid-journey. All of the men were killed, and the goblins kept them as hostages. Moving forward, Gobrou provides the women with food and further learns about their occupations as well. The blonde siblings are both cooks and tailors. The four-eyed woman is an alchemist, and the red-headed baddie is a warrior. Meanwhile, Gobrou keeps training the goblins and mocks them, which in turn makes them question their entire existence. One day, as it's raining, Gobrou and Gobkichi engage in a serious sparring session, which further heightens their inferiority complex. Later that night, the goblins decide to violate Gobrou's instructions and have a steamy night with the humans. However, Gobrou somehow gets the air of this and absolutely folds these mischievous, useless goblins. Seeing Gobrou's guts, the humans start crying pathetically, and Gobrou orders Gobmi to take the goblins outside. He makes an example of these goblins in front of everyone and kills one of them off, to ensure no one will try something like this ever again. Following this, Gobrou, Gobkichi, and Gobmi go up against the Tri-Horn Horse and somehow manage to kill it with Gobrou's skills and Gobkichi's insane strength. Upon consuming its meat, Gobrou acquires extraordinary skills including Scaled Drive, Quick Healing, and Triple Thrust. With this unique skill, Gobrou just needs to swing his sword once and the attack automatically multiplies. This makes him realize how this makes the Tri-Horn Horse such a formidable foe. Later that night, the red-headed baddie decides to sleep with Gobrou because she is scared, and it seems like Gobmi is no longer the ultimate simp. As Gobrou wakes up, he finds Gobmi sleeping beside him as well. After this, Gobrou and the others discover that another useless goblin named Gob has evolved into a hobgoblin. Meanwhile, the training proceeds, as Gobrou divides his army into different groups and assigns leaders to them. Gobkichi is the captain of the heavy warrior unit, Gobmi is the captain of the long-range unit, and Hobsato is leading the light warrior unit. He also wants to form a mage unit under Hobse, but it turns out that she's the only mage in the entire village. Leaving the training to the captains, Gobrou decides to slack off for a bit and heads deep into the forest. Upon confronting a Tri-Horn Horse, Gobrou decides to test his magic skills and takes out the unicorn with his first stage magic, Gay Dur. He ventures deeper into the forest until he comes across a blood-laden pathway and remembers the warning of that old fart regarding a giant bear residing in the north of the forest. With no regard for his life, Gobrou ventures further into the forest and eventually comes across the red bear and challenges it to a battle. Meanwhile, Gobmi and the others are extremely worried about Gobrou and wonder about his whereabouts. Even though they are sure that Gobrou will return safely because he is strong, Gobmi is still worried. Meanwhile, the red bear sacrifices its arm to avoid Gobrou's direct magic attack and counterattacks with its massive claws. Gobrou attempts to pierce its skin, but realizes how tough it actually is and has to step back. He utilizes his spiderweb power to trap him, but the bear frees itself rather easily. The bear suddenly emits a massive fire breath, which Gobrou barely manages to survive. With no other options left, Gobrou reinforces his entire body with water magic to counter the bear's fire breath and manages to pierce its mouth. Despite all this, the bear smashes Gobrou into a tree. Now that both of them are gravely injured, the battle can swing in anyone's favor. Even though the odds are stacked up against him, Gobrou is enjoying this battle as he ambushes the bear once again. Following a long battle, Gobrou has finally managed to defeat the red bear, but loses an arm in the process. After consuming its meat, he acquires fascinating skills, then falls unconscious. His level has exceeded a certain level, and now he can evolve into an ogre. Gobrou accepts the evolution as he falls asleep. Upon awakening, he notices how massive he has gotten and realizes that he's evolved into an ogre. He ventures back to the village. The goblins start to fear him because they fail to recognize him. However, Gobmi immediately recognizes him and scolds him for worrying her. Gobrou apologizes as the other goblins still cannot comprehend how Gobrou managed to defeat the red bear and evolved into an ogre. Gobkichi and the others are shocked to see that Gobrou has evolved into an ogre. Following a meeting with the elders, Gobrou decides to visit the human prisoners with Gobmi and the red hair following him like some random NPCs. Upon seeing Gobrou's ugly, pathetic face, the girls get scared and start tweaking. Gobrou somehow manages to calm them down as Gobme keeps pinching his leg for no reason. After this, Gobrou meets the swordsmith girl, who informs him that she forged a knife with the spirit stone, which shocks Gobrou and he pats her for this. Meanwhile, Gobme and the red hair are still pinching his leg. Gobrou meets the cook, who wants him to grant them some helping hands with the cooking. Seeing this, Gobrou comments that they'll make excellent waifus in the future and even proposes to them to become his wives. He must have hit his head in the previous head, as he fails to comprehend why Gobme and the red hair are hitting him. Following this, Gobrou comes across the alchemist, who is brewing some potion, which makes Gobrou question the reason behind it. The girl asserts that she was making it for self-defense, but after seeing that a goblin like him is protecting them, there's no reason for her to keep it. Gobrou is unintentionally rizzing up all the women in this cave. The following day, Gobrou realizes that he cannot train with the other goblins because they're literally useless. And he is so damn overpowered. He's overpowered to such an extent that a single punch is enough to fatally wound a goblin. With no other option left, Gobrou spends an entire day with the other goblins and observes them. As they're having lunch, Gob rushes inside the cave with an injured carbuncle in her arms. She informs him that she found the carbuncle while digging up a dungeon, and Gobrou heals her without wasting any time. After she wakes up, Gobrou explains the situation to her, and the carbuncle introduces herself as Latana. According to her, she was attacked by humans, and upon hearing this, Gobrou immediately realizes that it must be because of the gem on her forehead, which is a high-ranking material. Latana then begs Gobrou to get rid of the humans and further informs him that she was created by a magician named Velvet and that he would prefer that Gobrou takes his treasure instead of those humans. With this, Gobrou decides to persuade the humans and reassures the human women that he won't hurt them. Upon reaching the dungeon, Gobrou instructs Gobkichi and the others to hide as he'll try to persuade the humans. As he is exploring the dungeon, he comes across some losers who deem Gobrou as a random monster and decide to ambush him. Gobrou, on the other hand, manages to evade their attacks rather easily and attempts to persuade them to leave the dungeon peacefully. The human adventurers, however, persist that they will invade the dungeon and steal the treasure. Gobrou was keeping his calm until one of them actually struck his head with lightning magic. This pisses him off and he beats the living shit out of them. Just then, Gobkichi and the others also reveal themselves and contribute to this battle. After devouring the humans, Gobrou acquires some unique skills including Assassin, Crusader, and some others. He also obtains some high-class equipment as well, and much to everyone's surprise, he consumes these items and obtains some extra skills like an interdimensional box. Following this, they reach the treasure room where Latana expresses her gratitude and allows them to take all the treasure with them. Moreover, it seems like Gobkichi has also started simping over Gob. With this, Gobrou and the others empty the entire treasure room. Gobrou then notices the magician's dead body and decides to burn it. Much to his surprise, the magician was wearing armor, and as soon as he grabs it, the armor becomes a part of his body. He realizes that the magician must have passed on this legendary item to him since he didn't need it himself. Upon reaching back, Gobrou distributes the magic items to the hobgoblins and keeps some legendary items for himself, including a vermilion spear and a magical bracelet. Using this equipment, they gather the ingredients for bear soup, and the following day, they also hold a tournament to choose a leader. Since Gobrou cannot battle the goblins himself, he decides to venture into the forest. He immediately comes across a gold spider and acquires the skill Golden Thread. After this, he comes across a red deer and acquires some more skills. Following this, he comes across a massive tree where he comes across a dryad. According to him, dryads in this world tempt males from other intelligent species and use them for their nutrition. Seeing Gobrou's dazzling muscles, a dryad approaches him, and even though Gobrou tries to calm himself, he still gets tempted by her charm. With no other option left, Gobrou decides to unleash his inner beast and gets laid by the dryad. After all this, he heads back to the village where he finds out that two goblins have aptitude for magic and Hobse will be training them. Gobrou also notices that the girls are acting weird towards him, which shocks him, and he questions everyone about it. Finally, the alchemist reveals that Gobrou actually has a visible love bite on his neck, and the girls are jealous about it. Seizing the opportunity, the alchemist girl kisses him. Just then, the other girls also appear at the spot and urge Gobrou to do the same with them as well. With no other option left, Gobrou decides to give all of them a taste of himself, and also announces to take responsibility if anything happens. As Gobrou wakes up, he notices some people heading towards the cave and intercepts them immediately. Much to his surprise, some cocky, good-for-nothing elves have arrived there as Gobrou speculates that things might get a bit messy here. According to the arrogant elf, the humans are planning to ambush them, and for this purpose, they want goblins to help them. In exchange for this, they'll provide them with several months of uninterrupted food supply. Despite this offer, Gobrou brutally rejects them, just like my crush rejected me yesterday. With no other option left, the elves resort to violence, but my man Gobrou beats the living shit out of their leader and instructs them to surrender. Despite his warning, the elves keep attacking him, which infuriates Gobrou, and he brings out his massive sword to teach them a lesson. This legendary weapon allows him to reinforce unlimited crimson spears with a 100-meter range. Seeing all this, the elves piss themselves and run away like pussies. On the following day, Gobrou comes across a gray slime and consumes them. After devouring around 20 of them, Gobrou acquires the skill auto-replication that allows him to create copies of himself and even share consciousness with them. On day 46, Gobrou creates some casual clothes for Gobmi and the others from his blood clones. On day 47, Gobrou notices that the elves have arrived again to get their asses whooped, and this time around he captures all of them. The elves inform him that their pathetic leader wanted to take revenge because his fragile ego had been hurt, and they wanted to stop him. Hearing all this, Gobrou announces the beginning of a mock battle between the elves and goblins, and if the elves win, he won't kill them. With this, the battle begins. The male elves were even more useless than Sakura, and got instantly folded by Gobmi and the others. Gobrou didn't want to kill women, so he altered the brackets and somehow kept them alive. He then consumes the male elves and keeps the women as hostages. With all of this going on, the old fart wants to get a taste of all these elves, but Gobrou forbids him from touching them. The old fart, however, persists that he wants to set an example for the youngsters, and with no other option left, Gobrou allows him to. Meanwhile, Gobkichi has managed to evolve into an ogre variant and challenges Gobrou to a battle. Gobrou accepts his challenge, and the battle begins. Despite his overwhelming strength, Gobkichi fails to take down Gobrou, owing to his vast battle experience. At this point, Gobrou has realized that Gobkichi is actually his rival. Later that night, Gobrou was so damn exhausted from this battle that he comes across a weird creature in his dream. That creature hands over a present to Gobrou as he acquires a mysterious ability. The following day, Gob informs Gobrou regarding the evolution of 4 more goblins into hobgoblins, and one of them even had an aptitude for magic. The guy named Gobji addresses Gobrou as bro because they are siblings. Meanwhile, Hobse has also evolved into a half-spell lord, and her magic reserves had skyrocketed. At this point, she can single-handedly take down an entire army. Even though her abilities are far inferior to pure lords, Gobrou is confident that she'll evolve into one of them next time she ranks up. He then gives her some new equipment. Seeing all these evolutions, Gobrou postulates that goblins' growth depends on their environment, and with someone like him around them, newborn goblins would rank up significantly faster. Despite all this, some losers from the previous generation were getting jealous and wanted to leave the clan. Deeming them as a burden, Gobrou allows them to leave and hands over a mithril knife to them. Following this, Gobrou comes across a human who possesses the unique skill Monster Tamer and acquires it by consuming him. Later that night, the four-eyed woman informs him that she has succeeded in creating alcohol, which makes Gobrou insanely happy. He then informs the other goblins regarding their parent generation and asks if someone wants to leave the village. Seeing that all the remaining goblins trust him, Gobrou gets relieved. Following this, he creates some weird devices using his skill, which can be used as communication devices. Gobrou has also noticed insane development in Gob's skills as she captured a triple horn horse without killing it. Seizing the opportunity, Gobrou uses his Monster Tamer ability to tame the horse, and this paves the way for him to tame other monsters as well. He even tames the black wolves and makes them his pet. Following this, Gobrou notices something strange with the red-haired girl. As they are eating lunch after their training session, the girl acquires a new job and her eye color changes as well. Her abilities have significantly boosted after this new job, and she can now handle high-tier monsters by herself. Meanwhile, the human-elf war has also started. Later that night, Gobrou notices some demi-humans invading their cave with some monsters following them. These demi-humans were actually kobolds, followed by hundreds of undead skeletons. Gobrou and the others beat the dead shit out of them, and even take down the source of all this. Gobrou then consumes the undead leader as well, and it turns out that kobolds had actually made their way into Velvet's dungeon and accidentally woke up its guardian. With this, the kobolds started following Gobrou as well. And that's it for this one, folks. Please be sure to like, it truly does help us out. Thank you. And please subscribe for further content. We are super excited to see you on the next one.